To present Dr. West with the broken dishes stole, and it signifies that we recognize you as our uncle in this struggle. The broken dishes pattern in the slavery code, the Underground Railroad quilt codes. When that was hung, when the people were running away, when they got to the house where they were going to be that night, if this was hung, that said that somebody has spilled the tea. The dishes have been broken, split up into small places, and groups that go to other places. It seems like a negative thing. And often we've learned that when our movements change, or when the face of it changes, or when communities break up, it's not a matter of being torn down or a negative action. It's multiplication, because when a plate drops and all those pieces scatter all over the place, then those pieces create communities around them like dust does in a corner. And we become a bigger mosaic. And so we thank you for leading us and helping us.
Well, I'm just blessed to be here. Inspired. You all been inspiring East Coast, Midwest, all around the world. I was just in the Netherlands 4 years ago. They talking about Occupy Oakland. But East Bay is like that.
It is.
East Bay is like that. Got a rich history. I grew up in Sacramento. So we always had an inferiority complex. We up here. You know what I mean? We just didn't have the style and the pizzazz of Oakland and Berkeley and Albany and El Cerrito. But on the other hand, Sacramento still got something to offer. And the Occupy Oakland movement, if you all knew the impact that even though they think they can evict bodies, we know they can't evict visions, they can't evict ideas, they can't evict commitment in the souls of people. So we try to crush it and it bounces back. We're talking about truth, we're talking about justice. So truth crushed the earth, but as is again. That's exactly what you all have been able to enact and embody in so many different ways. Of course, New York right now, same situation. I was just at the Oscar Grant Plaza there, and same is true at Chicago Park now. See the spirits still haunt the ground. Still see the General Assemblies, hear the voices. They think somehow it's been displaced and dispersed, but they don't realize just regrouping.
Yes.
Just trying to come back together again. I appreciate those very, very kind, generous words. Very, very much so. But I'm here mainly just to learn and listen. Just to learn and listen. To have you all ask questions, instruct me, inform me. Yes.
As a people of color and queer people of color, what advice would you have to give for us as it relates to the Occupy movement?
Well, I mean, one is that anytime you have an emerging movement, that it has a number of forms of diversity and heterogeneity that in the early moments is not manifest. But over time, things begin to come to the surface.
Yes, yes.
And so you have to be very clear about, both the commitment to truth and justice that holds the movement together. But you also have to be clear about your commitment to truth and justice that has to do with the distinctive and specific forms of oppression that we have been wrestling with for hundreds of years.
Yes.
Gay brothers, lesbians, sisters, it could be brown, it could be red, it could be yellow, it could be black folk. All of us have been coming to terms with forms of being terrorized and traumatized and stigmatized.
Yes. Yes.
And we have histories of resistance to that terrorism, that trauma, and that stigma. And we have to just be honest about it. It's impossible to ask people to raise their voices and then ask them after a certain moment just become echoes.
No.
You know, there's no turning back. No turning back. Yeah.
I'm so happy you're here.
Yes, I'm blessed to be here.
We're blessed to have you. What about strategy, though? I know that we could talk about oppressions and how they cross borders and boundaries, but strategies become different when your oppressions are different, and I think that's an inherent problem in this movement. So how to coordinate strategies, because one group's vision may not be occupying, if you will, someone else's oppression. And so they're moving towards their movement with privilege to a certain degree, and experience with that privilege. So I think that's what's disconnecting and disjointing right now is how do we agree on strategy?
I mean, it's a tough question because it's open-ended at the moment. I mean, I do support the Occupy the Hood movement because it allows for the spilling over. We had it in Harlem on Stop and Frisk issue. You all know about Stop and Frisk.
Yeah.
700,000 young folks stopped and frisked, only 3.5% arrested, 87% black and brown. And we just go straight to Harlem, going to Brooklyn, going to the Bronx, so that when you're talking about particular communities of people of color, especially poor brothers and sisters, people of color, you got to talk about arbitrary police power. If you're in a privileged situation, you surprise the police to act in a vicious way. Where if you come to another situation, you surprise the police, got smiles on their face for a moment. Oh, this is different. Well, the context is different in that way, you see. And so that there has to be some communication with the variety of different groups saying this is what we're doing, these are the reasons why we're doing, and we're doing it to make the movement as a whole better. So people say, well, you're being divisive. No, we're expanding.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're creating impediments. No, we're enriching the movement. Yes.
I have the greatest respect for you, Dr. West. Thank you so much for making time to come. Thank you very much. My question is, I think a lot of young folks who were very inspired by campaign of President Barack Obama, and I campaigned for President Obama as well, but I think the policies that he has instituted since he came to the White House has been very disappointing, and I have seen you speaking out against President Obama's policies, and I think we have to clearly distinguish the significant meaning of President Obama getting elected as the first black president of this country was very emotionally overwhelming experience for me as well.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, people are, also criticizing President Obama for not having enough backbone or not really standing up truly with poor folks, people who are very suffering. So as this movement goes forward, what more do you think we can do to bring President Barack Obama back to our side, to stand up for us? And like this morning, I heard the SEIU president have come out and support President Obama for the next election, and the SEIU people have been standing in solidarity with Occupy Oakland, General Strike, etc. So I'm trying to kind of envision the bigger picture, starting from now on until the election cycle. What can we do?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question. Because as you know, I campaigned for the brother too, 65 events. Just a matter of months in the cold Iowa. I ended up in Ohio the night before. But I did it knowing that we live in a oligarchic, plutocratic society where the political system is so broken, where the options, mean-spirited Republicans, spineless Democrats.
Right.
Mean-spirited Republicans, milquetoast Democrats. Both of them tied to the same oligarchs.
Right.
Both of them get money from the same plutocrats, the Wall Street bankers and the corporate elites and so forth. So the question then becomes, my expectations are not that high when it comes to electoral politics.
Right.
So, I mean, so it's not just so much about Obama, it's that his choice to be associated with the Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chases, that's his choice. But he's dealing with a system that is so decadent, that's shot through with legalized bribery, normalized corruption, 26 lobbyists for every congressman. He's thinking about making a liberal, we're not even talking about a progressive decision, a liberal decision, in come the right-wing lobbyists with big money and so forth and so on. So we understand his situation. But we have to be honest about it and say, look, brother, this ain't about you in terms of a personal thing. We're concerned about poor and working people. And you're not siding with poor and working people, even in those moments where you could tilt in their direction. And so that kind of truth telling becomes important. People say, well, brother, what you going to do in the next election? What if it's against Rick Perry versus Barack Obama? You say, well, of course you don't want the right wing to take over the White House. But you know that for Barack to win the second time, the poverty rates higher than they've ever been. Prison industrial complex, steel, the immigrant and the racist policies toward our immigrants, especially the brown and the yellow immigrants in Alabama and Arizona. This is down to crypto fashion. Yes.
Okay, I have two questions.
Sure.
The first is, if you're comfortable talking about it,
Yeah.
what did you see how was being jailed a part of your personal strategy going? And I'm glad you're here too. Second question, given the response about Barack Obama and stuff, how do you see the role of women? And I'm gonna say black women in electoral politics. Can we do? How we gonna get, that's it.
That's real. That's real. I mean, look at the recent conflict with Sister Lisa Jackson of the EPA and Barack Obama. That was an ugly situation. Because she knew he was siding with the corporate elites. She was against it. Last minute he puts her down. She decided to stay, but she's going through some turmoil right now.
Right.
Serious turmoil right now. But your first question was about the jailing thing. Yes. But I've always found certain freedom in shackles when I'm fighting for justice. Always. Because what that means is you're saying to the world, not in any self-righteous way, you're willing to pay a price for something you believe in. You only got one life to live. Mr. Bumi Abu-Jamal is one of the freest men in the world on death row for 30 years.
Yes.
We're going to be in Philadelphia December the 9th. It was 30-year commemoration, him on death row. Hopefully, that's a good thing. We're going to have a good time. Moral Technique going to be there, do this whole album. Do the martyr, do the whole thing. Signs of the times, everything. Come on, Immortal.
You got wings, man.
We'll fly together. But my point is this, is that there's so many different ways in which you express your freedom.
Yes.
Of your heart, mind, and soul in fighting for freedom.
Yes.
George Clinton used to say what? Free your mind.
Yes.
That's Clinton genius.
Yes.
Right? That's the funk. That's part of the struggle too. I want my funk uncut. Y'all know about Bootsy Collins' new album, Funk Capital of the World? We got two songs on that together. We got a song called When Love is a Threat. That's what the Occupy movement's about.
That's
Loving poor people's a threat. Loving working people is a threat. You can't take it. You got to try to crush us.
That's right.
They don't know.
But see, I'm a Christian. That's Jesus on the cross. Oh, first thing he did when he went into the city was what? He attacked all of the elites. When you go to the temple in Jerusalem, that's Wall Street, Hollywood, and the White House at the same time. He did what? Ran out the marketeers. Don't make my house a prayer house of thieves.
Yes.
Love is a threat. Couldn't take it. Put him on the cross. Thought it was over. The love kept flowing.
Speak on them.
The love kept flowing. Now I'm talking about the real thing. I'm talking about these churches out here. They're like Congress. They corrupted, they bribed, they connected to the status quo. They drinking the Kool-Aid, don't want to be washed in the blood, a different tradition.
Yeah.
But every tradition has that. Judaism has it with Islam has it with Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Right. Damn.
Islam got it with Lupe Fiasco.
Yeah.
Lupe is Muslim to the core. He comes to my class every year. He prophetic with the Quran. Or you can be atheist brother and sister. They got a rich tradition of commitment to justice. You can be agnostic, rich tradition of struggle for freedom. So we all have it. Hindus have it, Buddhists have it.
We show.
Big on support. Hold on just, my brother. Hey, man. How you doing, man? We get this brother. No, we talking about all this. I got your phone call. You had that dialogue with Tori? Yeah. Give this brother a hand, though. No, I'm serious. We talking about young artists. The artists play a fundamental role. Because the spirit is important, connected to them, but you got a question.
I want to ask you something. I always appreciate our chance to build. I'm from out here. I'm from East Oakland. And my first introduction to you, brother, I was a young boy, maybe 13, 14, and somebody passed me Grace Mack. And when you were talking, since I heard you say something, you said, I'm going to go ahead and say, black women. We come up, especially being here in the Bay, you know, you can't really say black, you got to say people of color,
Right.
you got to be, you know, there's this real interesting thing where, especially because so much of the quote-unquote liberal stuff or the Occupy stuff is, you know, occupied by white folks. Where when we talk, as soon as the conversation around race comes up, oh, we're talking about all people, we're talking about class, not race. And I even see a lot of black folks, you know, buying into that. And us being, well, I went to the Black Star concert last night, you know. And and most in Kwali did brown skinned ladies to no brown skinned people. And so for me, I'm just wondering, especially because how, you know, the ear that you have, the people in the audience you have, what is your take on the importance, or maybe it's something that we need to transcend past? I don't want to assume what your stance is on black folks being unapologetically black folks in a struggle that while everyone wants to go, oh no, this is about all people. So I'm a heterosexual black male, but I stand in alliance with, and I'm an advocate for the rights of gay folks. So gay folks can come to space and go, gay.
Right.
And they're gay within these circles. Of course, there's other circles, like, so gay folks can come in a circle like this and go, gay rights, Occupy, and there's oh yeah. But if we come to space and we like, you know, black. Well, brother, you know, so what is your feeling on that?
No, but see the thing, my brother, I appreciate that question, is that I am old school about it. Which is to say that, you see, in the 1960s and 70s, many of us were willing to live and die as we are today to affirm the humanity of black folk and the right of black folk to define who we are. And in defining who we are, we don't define who we are by putting others down. We define who we are relative to our history and embracing others.
Yes.
So that when I say I'm a free black man, I mean that. And the black is a way of keeping track of the specificity of a vicious legacy of white supremacy that other folk may not have experienced. They can empathize with it, they can sympathize with it because they're moral human beings.
Yes.
But existentially and experientially, they may not have gone through the same thing. That's what I said with my gay brother and lesbian sisters, right? They say, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, right on. I'm with you. I ain't got the same experience. I can read all your texts and everything else, but I ain't got your experience. So you go on and be gay and be lesbian. But Lord have mercy, you know I'm gonna be black. Why? Because that's who I am in terms of my understanding of my humanity. It doesn't exhaust it, but it means my commitment to truth and justice was initiated by my hatred of white supremacy and my love of black people. Now, if I run into black folk who loving everybody but black folk, I know that's what I call the Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. Something just ain't right. But on the other hand, you can run a black folk and all they loving is black folk. You said, well, it's better to love black folk than nobody. It's like the early Malcolm, right? The early Malcolm loved black folk.
I think distinguishing the black and the gay is problematic, though. I'm black and I'm gay.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm also female, obviously.
But see, in that case, you got black and gay, or black and lesbian said explicitly. See what I mean?
Those things don't disconnect.
So there's not a disconnect, but the disconnect is one in which when you got white gay and white lesbian, and oftentimes they become dominant voices in context. Then when they say I'm gay, I'm lesbian, and black folks say, well, no, maybe I need to back off of this. Just talking about people of color in abstract. I'm just human beings. I'm just on the planet. No. The police looks at you. You're not just on the planet. You're not generic. They're coming at you for a certain reason. That's part of the legacy of white supremacy. And the same we're talking about the vicious legacy of homophobia, the vicious legacy of anti-Jewish hatred, anti-Arab hatred, anti-Muslim hatred, anti-Asian hatred, and so forth. You want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, I feel like what I'm hearing and what I feel like is that this movement is something that is humanist. And that's important. It's important to keep that. But in that, it has to have room for black people. And it has to have room for gay people. It has to have room for everybody. Because if you start cutting these people out, if you can't be black here, then this isn't really about being humanist. If you can't be gay here, this isn't really about being humanist. And that's that's what I feel like, and that's what I feel like I'm hearing is that, if it can't include us, then then it's not the movement that they say it is. But it has to include us.
But the movement is us.
Is us.
I'm not feeling that. Like, I'm sorry, I just have to, I'm in so many spaces where we have, for better or worse, entitlement, right? Where folks are like, you're dividing this. It's like, no, this has been ours. This has been ours. Just because some folks finally got down with the 99, it doesn't mean the 99 have already existed.
That's right.
Yeah, because I feel like this is about inclusion, but it's like, instead of, for me, I don't want to have to ask for permission to be part of my movement. That's not what this is about. This is like, we see ourselves going in the right direction. Right? No, I feel you, brother. I'm not trying to.
I'm feeling it.
I walk into rooms and I keep wanting to say, like, this is ours. This ain't just like yours or mine, this is ours. So how can we do that without trying to suppress the difference or erase the difference? That's what makes us so different, right? Sorry.
And one thing to keep in mind, the larger backdrop is a corporate media that promote weapons of mass distraction. Right? All kind of lies. And so people are coming out of that context. We haven't had enough spaces in our society that's been in place long enough to have these kind of dialogues. When we talk about humanity, we always already are talking about black, brown, yellow. We always already are talking about gay, lesbian, so forth. Because the mainstream is saying, well, humans associated with whiteness, straightness, 1%ness, and then let's see who we're going to include.
Right.
That's the dominant discourse. And we have to admit, that's the discourse that was taught to us when we were 7 years old, 9 years old, when we weren't occupiers in 3rd grade. All of the propaganda is coming at you very early. And you got to grow out of that mess.
Grow out of it.
I don't actually know if this is our movement. I think that the movement is it was mostly founded by white people, but really heavily dominated by white people. So although truthfully, yes, like Latino people, all people of color are the 99%, definitely not in the other 20% of the 99%, like the bourgeoisie. I don't think that necessarily makes it our movement. And so my question is that all the kind of time we're spending talking about being included in the movement and trying to make it ours, could that time be better spent creating something else? And I feel really hostile to the idea that all activism now has to relate to the Occupy movement, and I think that is kind of like activist gentrification. All the other struggles, the anti-police brutality movement that was like going strong here, like it's hard to organize that now unless you're saying we're occupying. And that is really violent. That's really violent. So like as a member of the working group, I do want to figure out a way to once I come to I want to make sure people of color are safe in space. But we're not safe in space. Like it's a really bad Occupy Oakland. It's not there right now, but it was a really violent place for people of color. Like a black trans woman had a knife pulled out on her. It's a really violent place for women. Yes. The people You can't even be there. You
Can we
can't.
just segue over to this question because she said.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, absolutely.
One thing, before I ask my question, I just want to say, 14th and Broadway was violent before Occupy Oakland. And that was just a manifestation that when that youngster got shot, that was a reality check of like, we're no.
Right.
You know, and the crime had gone down. There had not been any shootings until the encounter was there.
But even
That it was a place that was holding it safe. And it wasn't safe 100%, but none of our communities were safe 100%. But that got safer because that's how I just wanted to comment on that.
But even in that situation though, like what I'm talking about is the blatant white male supremacy that's happening.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We all are.
And that's something that needs to be addressed, and that's not addressed when we say it's not a violent space, or let's look at violence in relation to other violence. Even in that situation where that young man was shot, he stayed at Occupy like 3 nights, which is more than I've ever stayed there, but they're not holding him on a pedestal as like the occupied activist. Right.
That's right, like it did Olsen.
That's right. My question was in relation to what she's saying, and what I had mentioned earlier. So as these power plays happening, as privilege is coming up, and as these shifts and these conversations, these very necessary, very uncomfortable, very hard conversations are coming, and people are disengaging and not wanting to give people, allow people a space to come in. How do we do this? Like, with you being in academia, I'm sure you have to deal with this all the time. You see this all the time. How do we have really solid conversations that move us forward, that we agree to maybe be in solidarity? Maybe, how do we move through this? How do we move through this? Because this is very difficult. This is very difficult. We're not just being marginalized. I can give you the anecdotes of what happened. Like the meeting last night where we were told we could not exist because we were sanctioned by Occupy Oakland. This is Occupy the Hood meeting. Last night we was told they could not exist because we weren't sanctioned by Occupy Oakland. Where the people of color, when there was a board out there, when there was a camp, every single day I have to go out to that board because I swear to God, every single day someone erased the people of color council from the time and place. So these are anecdotes of what's happening. There have been black men who've been coming to the GA to come and meet, and when people have broken out into more than one black man has told me this. It's something that black men are doing. That every time they go break off into small groups, and they come up into a group and a group of white people, oh, this is when we break off groups. Being blocked from joining. How do we do this? What is the strategy, the conversation, the accountability, the shift? How do we get there?
My question was actually is it okay for us not to do that?
And just go.
So that's kind of the question. How do we do that if we're gonna do that? If we're not gonna do that, is that okay for us to disengage from the Occupy movement and do our work? How does your
I say yes.
Say something that's based on recent experience with Brother Carl Dix and myself in New York. Called for this focus on stop and frisk. The last thing in our mind was to ask permission from anybody.
Amen.
It doesn't mean we're not against any movement, Occupy movement, or whatever it is, but you don't have to ask permission at all. This is part of the freedom of living your own voice. And not only that, but because there's a lot of different kind of black people and brown people and red people and others, there's some black people who have significant patience with white brothers and sisters.
That's right.
There's some that don't.
That's right.
I mean, I love them all, but you gotta be honest about that. So I got partners who tell me, Brother West, I don't know where you get the patience to deal with white folk like that. I'm gonna do my own thing. I say, I'm gonna be with you in your context. Right? Because I'm able to generate some patience such that I can be part of that movement. No one movement has a monopoly on truth, goodness, beauty, the only way you talk about freedom of justice. It's just a fact. But the challenge is, this is what we were talking about earlier, the challenge is we have to keep some kind of lines of communication. So let's say I want to be able to do my thing, focus on arbitrary police power, and Occupy movement not making that a priority. And I'm going to do that. But I'm still concerned about corporate greed, and they primarily talk about corporate greed. So you become multi-contextual. Multi-contextual. We're talking about these issues that affect this disproportionate number of black and brown and yellow and red youth, and we focus on this. If you don't have an interest in it, we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
You all talking about corporate greed, I'll be there for corporate greed, but I'm gonna be dealing with police brutality too. And of course, you hope in the lines of communication that folk who are in the Occupy movement, and they thought about police brutality, say, yeah, that is wrong, that's unjust. And the basis of the movement is a commitment to truth and justice. And the condition of any truth is to allow suffering to speak. If you can't allow suffering to speak, you're not concerned about the truth. So I just go to anybody in the Occupy movement. Oh, you want to exclude Occupy Hood focusing on police brutality? These people catching hell over you. I thought you were concerned about justice and suffering. Oh, I see you've been more selective than you thought. Or I have to wait until you authorize a focus on it? Please. I was born that night, but not last night. Shit. No, I'm not putting up with that. But the important thing is not to think that somehow you're contra or anti. You are critical. That's a different thing. The Occupy movement deserves to be criticized for its limitations, its parochialism, and so forth. When they talk about corporate greed and ready to go to jail for corporate greed, they deserve to be applauded. They deserve for us to be in solidarity with them, because corporate greed is connected to a lot of the hell that poor people and working people are catching, no matter what color they are. So that you see, it's complicated. It says I don't think there's one answer, and I think that different persons have to make different kind of decisions as to the conditions under which they raise their voices. Very much.
Yeah, I think even the General Assembly process has to have a lot of transparency. Like I heard over the weekend on CNN, they were talking about how the New York Occupy movement has a spokes council, because the way the decisions have been made in Oakland is by General Assembly process every night. But in a town like Oakland, where a lot of poor working people of color are living, they're working at nighttime. They cannot go to every General Assembly. So the decision-making process, like why does it have to be made by whoever just happens to show up that night? And why can't we have a leadership, a committee formed by the different people of color community, and the decision can be made collectively, And there hasn't been a transparency of how the fund is going to be used. We know that Occupy Oakland has received $20,000 or more from Occupy New York. And New York folks have come out very clearly. This is how we're raising our money. This is how we're going to make a decision for what we're going to spend how much money for. And in Oakland, that hasn't really been discussed, So the folks who came out on general strike a few weeks ago was people who not necessarily go to General Assembly every day, but they came up because they resonate with the message. But I think in a way this leadership, most dominated by white folks, have really failed to capture the momentum. They have not reached out to the people of color who came out in support of the message. So I think we really have to kind of reevaluate the situation, because this movement needs us, and without us, they're not going to survive.
Can I respond to that a little bit? I was checking out this rereading To Be Young, Gifted, and Black by Lorraine Hansberry. And in her famous To Be Young, Gifted, and Black speech to these teenage writers, she says, at the end, she says, and this is not just to black people, I'm decoding this for all of us people, brown, yellow. Despair, did someone say despair was a question of the world? Well, then listen to the sons of those who have known little else, if you wish to know the resiliency of this thing you were so quickly resigned to admit to this thing called the human spirit. I'm thinking that I'm finding that I'm in the W generation, not the X, that it's about and also, not either or. And as we engage our creativity, because we need the masses, you don't have to agree on everything, just one thing. And not asking, or not even feeling like I have to ask permission to go or be anywhere. So, and also creativity, and then would you respond to the importance of the generational backup and transgenerational and transcultural expressions as creativity in building ourselves and our communities, because we know it's going to be us that mobilizes our communities, not Oakland Occupy. The importance of all of that a little bit.
Just 5 minutes if you can.
No, you already broke it down. I think one of the reasons why we do have a lot of apathy and a lot of complacency in poor working class community is because very few people are convinced that there's enough visible leaders or spokespersons or organizers who are really for real.
Right?
See, so the first requirement is, and this is in part what the genius of Lauren Hansberry is, the first requirement is you just have to be folks who have the courage to be themselves and know that no matter what, you're not going to sell out. You're not going to cave in. You're not going to give up so they don't feel manipulated. And we live in a culture where everybody's up for sale.
Yes.
Everything is up for sale. That's the commodification of the whole society in the world, which means there's no integrity that's visible in the way in which it ought. So the first, that's one of the reasons why it's going to take peoples of color and very, very select, deeply loving white brothers and sisters who are the John Browns of the world. John Browns of the world. So black folks say, oh, Lord, this white brother loves black folk more than most black folks. That's why Malcolm said John Brown can join my organization. He said that's a black nationalist. Right? But what I'm saying is, it's just a matter of a search for realness. That's why we got to talk about love. That's why we got to talk about love. Because love's the real thing.
Love is spirit.
Love is the real thing. That's when you can have a red sister leading Asian masses.
Yes.
That sister got love.
Yeah.
But she has been through a fire so that people are clear. She ain't going to sell out. She ain't going to manipulate. She ain't going to run off and co-opt folk in the movement and so forth. And the people have been co-opted over and over and over. And we got to be honest about this too. And namely that when you get those kind of people, those tend to be the ones that the powers that be want to crush. Because they understand that when you get enough folk like that, I'm not talking about these leaders like Malcolm and Martin, I'm talking about everyday people. Because that's the real movement. You get them, that's folk you want to crush. Because the powers that be are very serious. So one of the things we discovered in New York, we had so many infiltrators. The FBI knew stuff before we even had a meeting. Because the powers that be said, you know what, this is a serious movement. They're not just out here having fun. When you get that kind of seriousness, then folks say, hold on, let's pay some of these folks to go in and infiltrate and find out what's going on. And that's real. Y'all know about Black Panther Party in Oakland? Oh my God, Bobby Hutton. Never forget Brother Bobby. All the different infiltration, they said, wow, Huey and them, they're not just playing a game. They gotta be a movement. Our vacant. He's on the vanilla side of town. He's hanging out with Huey now. They serious. I mean, this is in the 60s, so you had a lot of ideological battles that are different than today. You know, communism and socialism and so forth. Yeah, my brother.
Dr. West, I just want to tell you that we actually had a movement to on the low have another camp at Lafayette Park that would be more people of color centric, and like we just keep it on the low, and we're gonna move there on, I forget what day it was. We got there, the cops were waiting.
Already, don't know about
The cops were just like, no, you can't have it here. We haven't said anything.
And what they could have done was, we got the tape, listened to it last night, we appreciate the rhythm of your linguistic expression. They said they'll listen to it together. Know who you are and maybe know who your mama is. Yes, my dear friend.
Yeah, I think the movement here is, we're talking about the white, it's called white dominated movement. I think they're waiting for us to lead. And I don't think they really know what to do. I think we need to, they're waiting for, the world's waiting for us to lead. That's how I feel. And maybe they don't think that, that's how I feel. So I want to know what strategically, like, you know, there's so many issues on the community level. We can take a few issues and we can take all the way through Washington to the world for years to come. Like where would you direct our energies? I mean, that's not, I know it's a lot, but give, you know, something limited.
Yeah, I think that, and here I am indebted to Brother Martin, though, because to connect issues of poverty The issues of empire. His day it was Vietnam. These days, still Latin America, the Middle East, and it's Asia. And Africa. Even though the Chinese is a bit more than the American empire.
Right.
But I think that that is going to be the wave of issues that could seize the imagination of a larger number of people, not just those within the occupied movement.
All right.
See what I mean? And it's got to be moral, it's got to be spiritual.
Yes.
Say that.
So you start with your children.
Yes.
45, 42% of them in or near poverty.
Yes.
That's a level of moral sickness and pathology we don't have a language for. Donny Hathaway couldn't even write a song in Japanese.
Speak
You know history. You see what I mean? But among large numbers of people, that affects them.
Yes.
In ways that a lot of ideological issues don't.
Right.
See what I mean? And the same would be true, I think, in terms of our military industrial complex. Wars, the drones being dropped, killing innocent people. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's real. And I think it has capacity to seize the imagination. But that's what Martin ended with, right? Trying to connect the poverty of poor folk of all colors and the imperial realities, especially as the empire continues to decline. But that's just one voice, that's just my voice. But I love your point about this sense of just seizing the leadership.
Yes.
Doing what you think is right.
Yes.
And not having to ask for permission.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And I should say this, Oakland. I just said this because I'm in Oakland, but Oakland is a very, very distinctive place.
Yes.
In the history of struggle in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Now, we used to think it just had to do with Negroes coming from Louisiana. Moved to the East Bay. The way black folk from Mississippi went to Chicago.
Right.
And had a disproportionate impact on shaping things. Now, we know it's more complicated than that. I'm just being suggestive. But there is something about the history of Oakland in terms of class formation and shit fitted in the unions and Jack London and so forth. And the perception of the world is what? Bay Area is always on the cutting edge, in the vanguard. Now, many of us know, well, that could be a lie. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I believe there's something true about that. There really is something true about that. Which means that what you all do, what takes place here, people tend to watch much more than Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
Or even Miami with our Cuban brothers and sisters, Latino brothers. Something about them. Yes.
I think, does anyone want to speak? Is already Go on.
Okay.
You talked, I heard you talking at the Goldman Sachs. You had the Goldman Sachs and Chris Hedges,
Or the trial.
the trial of Goldman Sachs. And during that, you spoke so eloquently about so many things during that. And one of the things that really resonated with me was, when you spoke about this earlier, is that you're talking about this historical moment and this movement as being spiritual. And that I feel like it's something that people, and this is how I interpret that, this is something people are feeling. It's on a human level. And also it has something to do with these, what you just said, the dots being connected. The dots are being connected in a very clear way for folks, and they're feeling it. And also it made me think about the space that's been opened up, and the space for dialogue and possibility that's been opened up, and that has not been there before. Could you speak a little bit to the spiritual dimension? Because it seems really obvious that people are feeling stuff, but a lot of people are not talking about it. Can you speak a little bit about it?
Oh, that's very real. No, I always begin with the spiritual. Always. I just move the level of vibes. So that when you walk into any Occupy, when I was in Occupy Seattle, I looked at the people's faces, tried to sensitize, be sensitive to their souls. And what do I feel? I could feel joy. Now you see, joy is qualitatively different than pleasure. The dominant culture is about pleasure. Instant gratification, stimulation, titillation. The culture is superficial spectacle. It's on the surface. superficial, like the bubblegum music. No soul stirring, it's just body stimulating. Joy is soul stirring. That Sam Cooke, that Lou Rawls. It's deeper. It's much deeper. The joyless quest for pleasure. That's dominant in the culture. Get all the pleasure you want, still empty. Freak performance every weekend, still empty. Want some joy. You walk into the Occupy movement, it's like you walk into the right context. Because again, Occupy has no monopoly on it, but it's the latest manifestation. And joy is a spiritual reality. Profound. It's like looking in the eyes of your daughter, or your son, or your mom, or your grandmama. So that ain't pleasure, that's joy. And people haven't experienced that in community, with bonds, taking risks, going to jail. When we were in jail the second time in Harlem, we were there for only 9 hours. And we sang Motown and Philly sound and stacks for 7 hours till all of our voices went out. Got the words to Luther and so forth. Because the song and the music is about the spirit too.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's very important to use that language explicitly. Joy, love, trust, taking risks, paying cost. And we live in a society in which everybody wants to reduce human value to market price.
Show up.
Every sphere of human life they want to subject to market
Where
capitalism.
people are ranked, ranking in schools, and reduce the numbers.
And the irony is that this is true even for the 1%. All the money in the world. Look at Steve Jobs. Y'all read his biography? The recent one of Walter Isaacson? Now he's a billionaire, he's an entrepreneurial genius, he got an iPad and all this kind of stuff. Billions of dollars, but wouldn't give a penny for his daughter to go to Harvard.
Really?
And then cried when she refused to allow him to come to her graduation. He said, Brother Steve, man, you got all of these material toys and can't get the love of your baby? What kind of life you think you live in? I'm not using it just to pick on him, but that's characteristic of people obsessed with glitch, greed, and gluttony.
Right.
It ain't no joy in it,
Right.
but it's a lot of pleasure. And that's why I use that language. But I use the language only because I come out of that tradition. Slaves on the plantation.
Yeah.
They had great joy, but was catching hell every day. Listen to the spiritual. You see the joy. But catching hell every day. Jim Crow. Every day. Just niggerized to the core. Intimidated, rendered scared, deferential, walking down one with their back. And yet, when they felt free in the churches, in the clubs, here comes the blues. Here comes rhythm and blues. Here comes George Clinton. God, and the rest of the world takes heed of that, don't get me wrong. Because everybody wants joy. Everybody wants some joy. But when you in a society where the very ability to cultivate joy is eroding every day, the Occupy movement has tremendous attraction. Tremendous attraction. And I do think, again, in this regard, that people of color have a historical advantage.
Yes.
Not genetic.
Yes.
Doesn't make people of color better than other people. But we got historic advantage. Ancestral memory, that's it. And the fact that you have made catastrophe your constant companion. It's not an anomaly in your life. And if the catastrophe has been a companion and you still got joy, you still got style, you still got love, you got a level of spiritual maturity in your tradition that the rest of the folk need to get in on if they're going to sustain their movement.
Yeah!
And that's just a matter of just communicating with folks. Say, you know what? I ain't trying to say that black folks better, brown folks better, whatever. We got a number of physically challenged brothers and sisters. You got much to teach us in terms of dealing with catastrophe every day and still got a smile on their face. Woo! Or even Stephen Sondheim. You know Sondheim, the great musical theater, Falling, Company, Sweeney Todd. He was the only child, 7 years old. His mother gave him away to Oscar Hammerstein and Dorothy Hammerstein. She was about to go under. She was having a a surgery, and the doctor said, I think you'll write your last note. What do you have to say? She said, I only got one sentence, just dictate it. Give this to my son. I have no regrets in life other than the fact that I gave birth to you. That's what son I've been dealing with all his life. Beginning with West Side Story, right in the lyrics. Now you see, he's a Jewish brother, white brother, on the other side of town. My mama loved me. My daddy loved me, my deacon loved me, my pastor loved me, my little league coach loved me. Had some sisters to love me, won't get into the details. This brother is in a world where his mama don't love him and his father left him. That's catastrophe. That's deep. He knows alienation. I don't know as a free black man. But I know some historic structural conditions that he don't know. So I learned from him. He listened to Sweeney Todd and the music. He learned from me. He listened to the tradition that produced me. Because in the end, we're still talking about the tradition that produced us even to get to.
Given that the media framed this movement as
Yeah.
a leaderless, focusless, youth-oriented, white, male-dominated, I find that a lot of folks of color in your generation, my generation, because I am that young, they don't want to be part of this as much. And it's like, how do we engage the older folks? Because older folks, especially black folks and other folks of color, they're used to leading Chavez, King. So it's like, oh, wait, y'all just hang around, y'all need to, you know what I mean? That's the attitude in Oakland, too. It's like, so, it's like, how do you think you engage that?
Yeah, that's a deep question.
Can I talk to that?
You want to jump to it? This is for them.
Glover said this to us earlier, that we have to read it. He said it on that stage, but it was to everybody that we have to redefine our humanity. So it's our call, and we know. And then when he got on KTFA, and David D was asking the meaning of that, he was saying that all movement, all effective movement, has to be grounded in community, which exit the ego. The Black Panthers were walking the kids across the street and giving them food. And I'm totally agreeing with Uncle around us taking that leadership. We're not having to ask, because we have the salt that's going to preserve this movement. Because all of us, not just black people, but all people of color. And it's a matter of creating this space that we do have, POC, QPOC, this loose organization of people, to create what we want that to look like. And be the model, because at the general strike, it was when those black, brown, and yellow people of color came into that general strike and they started playing James Brown, that the feeling happened that people will never forget. We can galvanize that for that whole movement, for ourselves, and whatever other movements that are dealing with what's human.
No, indeed. I think that the young generation learn from the older learn from the young. And one of the things that an old school brother like me can learn is oftentimes my generation had forms of leadership that was not democratic, that was not open, and that required serious self-criticism. So that messianic models of leadership must be rejected. Creates personality cult. It generates the ego, machismo, competition among the brothers at the top. And that's not a good thing. Even if we love the brothers. I mean, we all love Huey Newton. But if you worship like Huey year in and year out, that's like being a celebrity. You know Kanye 10 years ago, what happened, Kanye? Man, you broke his knee on this night, let's go have some hot dog. Now, he's a celebrity. He's been through some changes. And I'm not picking on Kanye, even though he needs to pick on. Might be my cousin, you know what I mean? But that's true in the movement. There's something about fluid forms of voices being heard that I like among the younger generation that I'm critical of my generation. And yet at the same time, they have to learn from older generation. You got to have a bit more form, a bit more structure. Don't be afraid of authority, but allow that authority to be criticized, allow that authority to be scrutinized. But you see what I'm saying? So I think it cuts both ways. I think one of the reasons why a number of the older generation are a bit distant is because in general, there's such a generational gap and such a profound distrust of older people vis-a-vis young, and younger people vis-a-vis old, and there's few contexts where they really have transgenerational bonding. So they bring in all of that to their perception of the movement. All these young people, well, which one are you talking about? It's like, well, I can't stand that hip-hop. It ain't got no politics. What about Lupe? Lupe who? They don't know what they're talking about. Because they haven't investigated enough to realize, like, if a young folk came up to the older folk and say, I can't stand you all's lack of politics because it looked like all of y'all was just into Rudy Ray Moore and Dolomite. Now, Rudy Ray Moore was a popular brother, but he speak on behalf of the whole older generation. You see what I mean? So that's like making, Lil Wayne speak on behalf of everybody. No, not at all. He's making a lot of money, highly talented, got a lot of tattoos. But he was speaking on behalf of everybody. He got all this underground hip-hop artists coming out of here. Rich, deep, courageous. And one last point, it is in part a gender question. It's a gender question too. The sisters of all colors don't have better humanity, more humanity, but they've been in contexts where they've been confined to caring and nurturing, forced to examine themselves, and less prone to vicious form of ego competition. Now, part of that is negative because in a patriarchal society, they are under the male normative gaze. What do I look like in front of the brothers? Am I attractive for the brother? Am I wearing something for the brother? That's not healthy. But at the same time, when it comes to who was actually involved, even the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party, in terms of the programs, disproportionately women.
Yes.
Disproportionately women. Caring, nurturing, keeping the organization going, and the brothers up at top fighting to see who's going to be macho. Not all of them, but I mean significant numbers, you know what I mean? So that the question that you raised, that's why I say it's a very, very deep one, because we can learn from both. Yes.
What is your advice on getting younger people, like especially 10-year-olds, because at times I work with elementary school students, and this is going to be a long struggle. It's going to be, I'm confident because everybody's input is, we're pushing one another. We're pushing and we're holding people up, trying to at least keep moving, but I know it's going to be a long struggle. And so those who are behind us, the younger ones, it's easy to interact with them with something like a video or something media-wise. So that, as an artist, I do that too. But what advice would you give in trying to kind of engaging more younger folks, 10 younger, so when they become our age, they'll most likely will be struggling with the same thing, or at least continuing, like what you say,
Spend time, just sit there and talk to them. What's on your mind? Then get beyond the superficial stuff. That's going to take about 45 minutes. That's it. Just trust it. And then get on down to the real thing. You know what I mean? And then try to be part of their world. So if they into certain cartoon characters, strike you as strange, check it out and see what's going on. Why are you not? Oh, I see. So just at that basic level. And then, of course, you want to expose them to things in the present that are critical, healthy, empowering, and freeing, and then try to expose them to the best of the past. Because see, by the time a young person is 13, if they have a Sankofa sensibility, they say, I don't even want to talk about the future unless I have a sense of the best of the past. You know you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know you're moving in the right direction. But see, what movements do is create awareness, awakening, enlightenment. So everybody says, yeah, I want to talk about the occupation, but what's going on? 10 years old, what's going on, mama? Occupy, what is on that? Occupy. What does that mean? Why are these people upset? You take the time to explain it to them. Oh, I see. Let's go down to the movement and walk around. Oh, they on fire for something different than most of the folk I know. They giving up on certain addictions and self-medications. That's what I've been exposed to. That's the dominant culture, right? It's addiction and self-medication. People in pain that need escape. These folk in the Occupy movement say, yeah, we talking about pain, but we engage in the pain to work through it. Ooh, wow, Mom. This is interesting. I want to be a poet. See that sister over there? She got Gwendolyn Brooks all in her. I was talking about the sister, I was just talking about the y'all could be poets too, but I'm just saying. I like words. Well, relate like yourself to an artist. Well, I want to be a hip hop artist. But all I can think about are what the dominant culture's talking about. No. You need to listen to Simone's technique. You don't have to agree with it. Get into his spirit. You got an alternative. What have you seen? And that time spent. All the difference. All the difference. Yes.
Touch on two things, but one, I think just like engaging the youth, going out and actually engaging with folks of the older generation can do a world of good. You know, spending that time having a real face-to-face conversation with people where they can actually have this person that they can relate to, that they know, that they can understand, they can start, to see what's happening here. I think it's got a real power to it. And that's, whether it's from an old person to a young person or from a young person to an old person, that actual dialogue, that conversation is so important. And I think that it's something that, builds community and something that we lack as a human culture these days is just a dialogue between the generations. I think that's part of this machine that breaks us down. So that's one thing I just think, but the other thing, we were talking earlier on catastrophe, and I'm walking on my folks fed the pilgrims, and I've been well attached to catastrophe, you have nothing left. But I think that one of the things you talk about with this baby and a special place that brings about so much cutting edge things is that we live day to day with catastrophe right under our feet. It's a constant reminder with everybody who lives here that chooses to live in this part of the world. There's an understanding that catastrophe can come like that at any moment.
With earthquakes.
With, just in the very area that we live in. And so I think for a certain sense that you just grow up there, you have to carry that with you. Whether you make a conscious choice to or not, it's there. And I think that's part of what makes this place. And you talk about spirits of the place. I think that's what is part of what gives the spirit of this place is that constant catastrophe. It's right there with us. We understand that this can change at any time, any moment. And I think it breeds a culture that's ready to embrace that change and make that change work for the best advantage of the people.
You make a lot of sense there, my dear sister.
Yes, I came in late, so I'm not just starting to ask, so if it has, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So you talked about the idea of movement being about awareness. I was struck by that because I was like, you're right, because the Occupy movement as a whole has brought this thing of natural awareness. Everybody's thinking about talking about it. So the discussion that I've been having with my friends and in my community really has been now we have a list of demands. We need to start pushing for more doing, right? So of activism, this list. And so I'm wondering, what do you think about that in the sense of do we need to typical the personality cults, right? The idea I'm okay, do we need all these demands? And do you think that movements have to look like that? Can we change it? What does it look like? Even the idea of awareness.
I'll say again that I think the first step is always trying to convince people to straighten their backs up and take a stand. That's wrong. Fundamental. Basic. And in the kind of society we live in, it's all about comfort, contentment, and convenience. You say, I refuse to be well-adjusted to injustice. Just take it there. And take a number of different forms. It could be on the corner, it could be an Occupy movement, it could be in your mosque, your church, your temple, in your trade union, whatever. I'm not deferring to this kind of unfairness, and I'm not going to allow my voice to be suppressed. That's basic. And that's prior to forms of organization and everything else. But in order to do that, you got to change the whole ethos of the culture and the country. Because you see, 55 years ago, that Occupy movement, they would want to put all of us under the realm of abnormal psychology. Something wrong with these people because they're not obsessed with pleasure and success and convenience. And they had isolated individuals out there, didn't have a whole group. And nobody talking about corporate greed, nobody talking about wealth inequality, nobody talking about poverty, nobody was really focusing on the schools in the way that they want. You had isolated voices and isolated organizations doing it, but it didn't have that high visibility. You reach the point, MSNBC talking about corporate greed. You shaping the national discourse. Greece, Italy, Portugal, Germany, all of them talking about it now, right? So that is a tremendous impact in terms of reshaping what I'm calling ethos. Now, the next steps, that's the more difficult. And I don't believe that the next steps have to include everybody. You see what I mean? And this again, we can learn from black people. You see what I mean? It's like Duke Ellington's band. He don't even sound the same, playing the same song Wednesday versus Thursday. That's different for classical music. Johnny Hodges, how you feeling tonight? I got a call from my girl. She ain't acting right. So I got a solo for 18 minutes, goddammit. Especially, you gonna hear from me. That's the name of the song I'm playing tonight. How you doing next night, Johnny? Only need 2 minutes, man. Everything's cool out here. Gonzalez needs it tonight. See what I mean? You got to be, so what does that mean? That means if you're going to raise your voices, then everybody not going to have to move in the same direction. Everybody got the same organizational form, the same demand and everything else.
That's right.
But we still are connected with each other enough to say, okay, you focus on corporate greed, let me know, I'll be there. You focus on police brutality, let me know. But that's going to be my priority. I'm focusing on housing. I'm going to focus on child, whatever it is. You see what I mean? Now that's a mature form, because see, a jazz band is the highest form of democratic symbolic action. There's no other form known to human beings that the victims of American democracy created the highest form of democratic symbolic action. All the voices heard, bouncing off of other voices. And it's not just the voices of the living. See what I mean? So when Johnny Hodges is playing, you hear Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
When Coltrane is playing, you're going to hear Louis Armstrong. Don't even have to be the same instrument.
Show up.
Because the voices of the dead must play a fundamental role for the voices of the living. And then you got that Sankofa sensibility. Oh yeah, no indeed.
This sister here has had her hand up for a long time.
Yes, go right ahead. I appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I just wanted to ask, like, do you think that now, it sounds like within the POC committee and whatnot, we're talking a lot about sort of like how white privilege and white entitlement sort of plays out, and I was just curious, like, do you think this movement and just like the consciousness and awakening that's occurring within us all, do you think it will allow for us to also talk about American entitlement? Which is also something that's, you know, it has an inextricable relationship to capitalism. And it's something that, like, you know, if we're going to be standing so often with solidarity with the rest of the world, I mean, how are we going to actually do that? And also have all these demands on our own system that obviously cannot be sustained, we must collapse. So I do think that there's not enough space for that now.
You hit many nails on the head simultaneously. But that's in part what I had in mind when I was talking about empire.
Native American.
You go to parts of the world and say, oh, these folk in New York talking about the 99%, they look like the 1% from my point of view. See what I mean? It becomes relative to context, given the imperial privileges and imperial benefits of being in an empire that dominates the world since 1945.
Straight up.
Well, the British Empire.
Yeah, because America was an extension of the British.
And we began to compete in World War II, but we didn't have the military might. Really, when the Japanese Empire attacked the American Empire.
Can I share my card with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. But your point about American entitlement, trues89.com.
Yes, I read about all of this stuff. Yeah. My thoughts at least.
Your name is Sister
Zisa.
Zisa. Absolutely. Absolutely. We got one more question.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of sort of like reiterate, you know what I'm saying, I had like two major points I wanted to stay on. One of them I wanted to piggyback on what you was making reference to, because first of all, we have to realize that there was a wise man who once said, he who's without sin, let him first to cast the first stone.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we have to be mindful of how our own personal actions it reflects the outcome of the community as in its entirety, you know. And I was raised as a child that, you know what I'm saying, if a man doesn't stand for something, he'll fall for anything. You know what I'm saying? So that's just one of the key points that we need to, you know what I'm saying, stay focused on. Like you were saying about, you know what I'm saying, he also said, this wise man once said that, how is the eye able to tell the hand that I have no need of you when they both play an important part of the body? You know what I'm saying? So, like, there was because we got the Occupy movement, which I'm like part of the security, but I'm also getting ready to become part of the more political aspects as well. You know what I'm saying? That felt like they were betrayed because there was an off branch, you know what I'm saying, of a group that decided that our voices are not being heard. We need a voice for the people of color and for the voices of the people that have already been, who grew up in this struggle, who lived this struggle since day one. For a lot of people, it just landed at their doorstep automatically, and now all of a sudden there's a problem. But this has been an ongoing problem that been needed to be discussed and evaluated. But people just looked at it, and then they turned their back at it like, no, we'll go along, you know what I'm saying, ignoring this issue. But now it's come to a point where this issue no longer is ignorable. And now we're at a point that we can do something. But my question is, how can a house that is divided stand strong? There is too many, I feel that there's too many divisions. This has become like a political war within a political war. Like, I'm part of the Occupy movement. I push a hard line. I even went to jail for this. You understand me? And what I've noticed, you understand me, in this movement is there's a lot of people who used to have things that have like more book smarts than some, even though there's some that are street smart that do have a formation of book smarts, but they're not recognizing those people who don't have the advantages they have as part of that movement. You understand me? And I don't believe that's justifiable, because then you're once again, you're classing, you understand me? And that's what we stand against.
Right. No, in some ways it comes right back to what we've been wrestling with since we came together here. Being very honest and candid about the ways in which all of us are affected by the evils that we're fighting. We talk about fighting white supremacy, male supremacy, then we see it in the movement. Talk about fighting imperialism, then we see it in the movement. Talk about fighting homophobia, see it in the movement. And of course, what else would it be? Because that's what history is.
Right.
It's going to be the quality of our response and resistance within ourselves and within the movement and within the larger society.
Right.
That's going to be the key. And that's where the bridge building becomes crucial. And that's where the willingness to tell the truth, even if it's painful, and still be able to embrace people after the painful truth telling is taking place.
See, and it's like, I have to agree with you. And I'm not a man of much talk. I mean, yeah, I can formulate my words and be a very articulate man because I'm a writer. But at the same time, I'm tired of talking, because yes, we can build an understanding and try to meet on a common ground. But then what do we do about the people who build that understanding and then turn around and discredits that understanding? I'm a hands-on dude, you feel me? You know what I'm saying? I'm a front liner, you feel me? And I'm ready to get my hands dirty. You understand me? Because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm tired of being taken advantage of. I'm tired of being told that I'm less than. I'm tired of being told that I'm inadequate or uneducated.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, though, historically, is every major movement spawns a variety of other kinds of formations. See that? Martin King got SCLC. Stokes and them say, oh, we love you, Martin, but we need SNCC. You would say, look, we love SNCC, but we need the Panther. The problem was, we had to feel bridges strong enough to hold off the FBI infiltration, and so we're turning each other against it. To say, you know what, Martin? We with you, but we not passive. We love you, we not into this Christian love thing.
I got one more question.
I'm sorry. The fire marshal is on the way.
You see the point I'm making? You see the point I'm making, though? The bridge building that still can be done, but don't be afraid to do what you think is right in terms of the kind of organizational form you take. One movement does not have a monopoly on it. Yes. As important as this movement is. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Before everyone leaves, we have one last thing. We want to thank Mr. Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West, and thank all of you so much for coming. I don't know, B, please come up. B and Marvin and perhaps Michelle are going to join us, start us off in a song. And we would love for everyone to jump in as a way to close this space.
And we also want to thank the Tingy for letting us use this space. And could you please support this artist? It's an independent space. Please support the artist who let us use this space. Please support it right there. Thank you.
We are gonna turn this round around. We are gonna turn this town around. We are gonna turn this town around. Decolonize. We are gonna turn this town around. We are gonna turn this town around. We are gonna turn this town around. Decolonize. I'm gonna treat my brother right. I'm gonna treat my brother right. I'm gonna treat my sister right. I'm gonna treat my brother right. Decolonize. I'm gonna treat my brother right. I'm gonna treat my sister right. I'm gonna treat the children. I'm gonna treat the children right. Decolonize. Let's remember the vigil tonight. Tonight we're going to be doing some of the things that we talked about, incorporating the energy and the information from our ancestors. We have to bring them into the movement. So please come, 7 to 10, Oscar Grant Plaza. Sister Michelle Jordan is going to be our MC. She's fabulous. So bring the people.